Hello, welcome everyone. Morning. Welcome to Cambridge Experience 3rd edition. Today we'll have the chance to discuss the topic Learning and Assessment, Ways for a Brighter Future, and hear from very special guests. Let's start with some housekeeping first, okay? We recommend the use of headphones to get better quality audio. Try not to have anything else running, and if you can, switch off any other programs on your computer. During this event, we'll have 2 short breaks. Try and take this time to stretch your legs and relax a little bit. To begin with, let's watch a video with Marícia Ferri, Pedagogical Director of Colégio Farroupilha.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Cambridge Experience event. I am Marícia Ferri, the co-director of Escola de Professores Inquietos and the pedagogical director of Colégio Farroupilha, one of the most traditional schools in Brazil. Colégio Farroupilha is an international reference in the teaching of English, as it is the pioneer to incorporate the preparation of Cambridge exams in the school curriculum, promoting this way the teaching and learning of English to international standards. We are very happy that Colégio Farroupilha and Escola de Professores Inquietos promote this event with the support of Cambridge Assessment English and Cambridge University Press. Its proposal is to bring discussions and to improve the teachers' continuing professional development, fostering innovative methodologies in the English teaching, opening doors for the students to develop and learn in this world without frontiers. In this edition, we have a team of Brazilian and British speakers who are referenced in DLT: Alberto Costa, Luciane Calcara, Ivan Siqueira, Glenn Huggs, and Ben Knight. Thank you for being here with us. We'd like to thank you, teachers, coordinators, directors of schools of many parts of Brazil, such as Paraíba, São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, Tocantins, Distrito Federal, and many other states, and our special preparation centers for your presence. I wish you all a great event.
Thank you, Marícia. Now, to talk a little about Colégio Farroupilha, Cambridge Assessment English authorized the center and its results at the school, we invite Luciane Calcara, Center Exams Manager of the center. Welcome, Lu.
Thank you, Marícia, for your lovely words. Thanks, Roberta, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can you see properly? Hopefully, yes. Thanks for being here with us this morning in our 3rd edition of Cambridge Experience. It's really great to have people from all over Brazil and even from some parts of the world joining us this morning. I'm Luciane Calcara, the Foreigner Languages Department Manager here at Colégio Farroupilha, and the SEM, the Cambridge Assessment English SEM, at Farroupilha, which is a private school of basic education in the south of Brazil. Farroupilha was founded by German immigrants in 1886 to offer a school with European standards of education to German families established here in Porto Alegre. Since then, Colégio Farroupilha has been faithful to its principle of educational excellence, conceived by its founders. Currently, Colégio Farroupilha has more than 3,000 students divided into 2 units, Três Figueiras branch and Correia Lima, which is a school branch wholly dedicated to teaching students in poor socio-economic conditions, with more than 400 students. In 2010, Colégio Farroupilha understood that a partnership with Cambridge Assessment English would help us to provide our students with excellent English language teaching in the school. Then we designed this pioneering project, which incorporated the preparation for Cambridge qualifications in the school curriculum. The project consists of students being prepared and taking the exams from the 4th year onwards with no additional costs to the families. And based on their results, we design future actions to improve our teaching and the students' learning, promoting the assessment of learning to assessment for learning. I think we've got a problem with our... Just 1 second, it happens. All right, I think now it's okay. We understood that with this partnership, we would be able to bring benefits to the institution, educators, and mainly to our dearest students. As the benefits to the students are concerned, apart from their executive functions, they develop while preparing for Cambridge exams, such as critical thinking, decision-making, and social-emotional abilities, for example. We can also say they've developed their proficiency in the language substantially. For example, as we can see in this graph, in 2010, when we started with the project in the school, we had only 3% of our students in the 3rd year of high school at advanced level. And we didn't have anyone at proficiency level. In 2017, the students who started their preparation for Cambridge exams in 2010, 29% of them left the school at advanced level and 46% were at proficiency level. Now in 2021, 85% of our students in the 3rd year of high school are at advanced and proficiency levels. Those students who graduated in 2017 also took part in a global trialing promoted by Cambridge. And the results of our proficiency students compared to the ones in other parts of the world were also excellent, as you can see in this graph. Since 2010, we've managed to help almost 2,200 students to get to advanced and proficiency levels, following our school program. Other benefits this project has brought to us, to our students, were that more than 13,000 students from our institution have received a Cambridge certificate, a lifelong certificate widely recognized all over the world. And almost 50 of our students have been accepted in more than 100 higher education institutions in the world. Also, with this project, we've been able to help our teachers to cater for their continuing professional development. And, for example, 88% of our teachers have Cambridge TKT and CELTA certificates. We also offer general English courses to all educators in the school. We understand that most of significant benefits this project has brought to the institution is the reinforcement of our image of excellence, competence, seriousness, and tradition, along with innovation. In 2018, for example, our case was presented at the IATEFL Congress in UK. The conclusion we've reached with this partnership of Colégio Farroupilha and Cambridge Assessment English is that it is possible to learn English in a regular school. Having said that, we hope that today's sessions will inspire you and show that it's always possible to improve the teaching and learning in our institutions, and that through integrating learning and assessment, we can find ways to cater for our students' brighter future. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Hello, everyone. I just realized I have not introduced myself. So coming back a little bit, I'm Roberta Lima. I'm Business Development Manager at Cambridge Assessment English, and I'll be the host of this event. So sorry about that, okay? It is amazing to see the growth of Colégio Farroupilha, of Cambridge at Colégio Farroupilha, and to see this very impressive results. You should all be very proud. Moving on, I invite our first speaker, Professor Ivan Siqueira, to give his presentation, Plurilingual Education Guidelines. Professor Ivan Siqueira has national experience with public administration. He has been on the National Council of Education since 2015, having participated in the main changes occurred in the segment, including BNCC, language teaching, and religious teaching. He was the president of Câmara de Educação Básica do Conselho Nacional de Educação twice. He has international experience in several educational missions, including Mercosul Educational, in which he represents Brazil since 2016, and in international relations with education, Brazilian schools in countries such as Japan, Portugal, etc. In addition, he is a musician and has a work called Outono da Infância. With no further ado, welcome, Professor Ivan.
Hi, Roberta. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for Colégio Farroupilha and Cambridge Experience 2021. It's a pleasure to talk a little bit about our bilingual education policy in our country, and hope that I can support your investments, your compliments in terms of spreading these new facilities and this new scenario that we hope that grow in our country, because we know that with bilingual education we can improve our education, not just in terms of English, but in terms of culture, in terms of multicultural experience, in terms of delivering opportunities for our students and their family to understand the new world, the new age, and the new time that we are living in. So I congratulate for this discussion, for this investment, and it's always a pleasure to be here and to talk a little bit about our document, our national framework. Indeed, it is not assigned until now by the Minister of Education, but we know that many states and many cities has been used this document in order to establish their own policy. Okay, so I will talk a little bit about the previous time in this scenario, what we have before this act, this framework, and what we expected after this document. We have been in discussing since 1 year. We have discussed this document in many places, in many situations, including Cambridge meeting and other meeting around the globe. So I would like to, is it possible to share my screen, or do I make by myself? Okay. I'm sharing here my screen. Then all right. So we have our document calls Diretrizes Curriculares Nacionais para Oferta de Educação Plurilingue, okay? So it's, we call Aparecer, CNA is National Council for Education, there's a number 2 and 2020. Our previous scenario, what we have and why do we need a framework like this in our country? We have been discussing this topic for about 20 years, you know, and 10 years ago, we have a document produced by National Council of Education exactly discussing what is supposed to be an international school. At that time, There were many other suggestions, many other documents in National Council asking for a national regulation, because many schools ask, okay, we are interested to make the right thing, but what is supposed to be a bilingual school? Because of course, bilingual education is a worldwide interpretation. There are many different possibilities to understand what is supposed to be bilingual education. But when we call in terms of bilingual school, we need a regulation, because every country is supposed to offer that regulation, so families can understand exactly what they're supposed to expect from school, and students and teachers. So national investments in terms of teachers training. So all these things are related to our regulation, you know. So many schools around our country, especially in Paraná and the south part of Brazil, some in Brasilia, some in Rio de Janeiro, and in other big cities, São Paulo, they start to asking frequently the necessity to have a national regulation about what is supposed to be bilingual school, the concerns and the topics and the things, all the things related to that. So we made a lot of discussion in our country. In fact, we were discussing in the time that we have BNCC. Most of you, of course, will remember, in 2017, 2018, when we have the first part of our BNCC and the second part. The first part related to the primary school and lower secondary school, and 2018, the high school part of our BNCC, our act, in fact, National Act for the Basic Education. So we have a lot of asking, we have schools, and then we start to receive asking from legislative, you know, legislative and the judiciary. They ask, well, we need a national document. Is it your job? National Council of Education and of course, Ministry of Education, it is your job. And we need this document in order to regulate this growing situation of offered of bilingual education that we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years before the pandemic, okay? So we have, previous that, we have an agreement with Mercosul, and we still have, okay, we still do have this agreement. So we're supposed to teach Spanish here in Brazil, and they are teaching Portuguese there. This occurs mostly in especially in some cities in Santa Catarina and some other parts of our states in our country. And we have a national regulation for indigenous language. We know that we have more than 230 languages of native people. So we have a specific law for that. And we do have a law and decrees and other acts, national acts related to deaf students' rights. You know, we have Libras, this how we call this language of deaf. So we have this in terms of documents, in terms of national act. And of course, we have many different experiments in our country related to bilingual education, including English or other language as additional language, for example, and we have institutes, and we have international schools, and we have bilingual schools, but completely different from one another. And when someone asks, okay, how do I know if I'm in a bilingual school or not? What is supposed to be the topic that I could check it, that I could understand, that I could use it in order to understand? So this was the scenario before our document. So we in fact, we continued, because when I arrived in National Council in 2015, as I said, there was a long discussion about bilingual education. So after BNCC in 2018, we continued this investment, and we start a national and international discussion about how could we design a draft related to bilingual education in this exactly what we have now, okay? So our problem, people, schools, family, and experts, teachers, everyone says that we have a problem. Our problem was we have a lack of regulation. And because of that, we need a public policy in our country in order to establish in a good background, a good, solid understanding of bilingual education policy, okay? So when we look all over the world, international experience, close in our neighbors in Latin America, in Chile, and Colombia, Argentina. We invite people from Spain. We talk a lot of people in Europe, in England, in the US, in Canada, in Australia. Many experience we have opportunity to know. And it's possible to say that all of these experiences share something in common. Is exactly what you are saying in this slide. They have a curriculum, they have standards, they have goals, competence, teacher trainings in research. This is what we have in national policy related to bilingual education. Of course, we can see some differentiation. Some countries put more emphasis in one thing and another. Some emphasize more here, more there. But in general, these are the main elements, the main topics related to our public policy related to bilingual education in many countries. Okay, so we tried in our document exactly to address this problem. What is supposed to be some of the problem? Because a curriculum, we know that curriculum is something that schools has the right to establish that, but they need elements, they need some topics in order so we can have a national document that could guide, that could serve to help schools and states and municipalities to design their policy, so we can have a national understanding about what we are talking about when we talk about bilingual education. Okay, so another point of interest related to our ACT document is that we made a lot of research. We discussed with international experts about these topics. You know, qualified teachers, objectives for learning, patterns of training, assessment, and so on, etc., etc., etc. And this explains why we do put it some of this topic in our document. For example, CFR qualification, B2 after some time of study, and for teachers and for students for the first time in our country, because we never had this kind of national assessment, because we never had a national policy for bilingual or plurilingual education in our country. Unfortunately, we never had that. We had discussion, we have some individual documents, we have in one state, for example, we have in Rio de Janeiro, we have in São Paulo, and then Santa Catarina, some parts of Paraná, but we didn't have a national policy related to that, okay? So this is our job as a National Council for Education, to provide general understanding about topics related to education, include, of course, bilingual education, because we don't have in our LDB, in our national law related to education, we have nothing about education except this topic that I talked previously. So every single topic related to qualified teacher, objectives of learning, patterns, and assessment are, of course, the structure, you know, of our document. It's easy to see that part in our document. Another thing important to highlight in this discussion, in this process, because it was exactly a process, because we took 1 year to write the document and to present to society and receive contribution. But in fact, as I said, we have been discussed for 20 years. I think it's too much, 20 years. And at least in the last 10 years, we have worked hardly at National Council for Education. Many people don't know, maybe Brazilian society don't know, but National Council for Education has discussed this topic for at least 12 years. So I think it's too much. So bilingual school in Brazil, and of course we research in our cities, in some states, in all regions of our country. We ask states and municipalities, okay, what do we have in terms of bilingual school in your state? We cover all this document. We read all this document. We discussed with these people, with experts in our country, and we have this summary. You know, we have this abstract. So we have exactly what we are designing, what we are suggesting, what we are approving in our document. So we have the understanding that bilingual school is a little bit different from bilingual education, because bilingual education is a general statement related to a policy of language learning. But bilingual school, they should offer integral curriculum and 2 language of instruction. It's not offer a second language and one or 2 more class in a week, because we had 2 extremes in our country. We have a school that offer just 100% of one language, for example, English, 100%. This is not a bilingual because bi means two, you know. And on the other extreme, we have a school that offer one, so 50 minutes more in a weekly days basis. So this is not supposed to be a bilingual school, the family says. So we try to cover this extreme and to present a middle point between that, okay? So, and of course, we look around the world and we look around good experience and of course, good results about that experience. So integral curriculum in two languages. So you have to teach in two languages, and the materials, the components, of course, chemistry and math. Of course, you have opportunity, you have the right to choose, but you do have to offer this curriculum and two language integrated. This is our understanding about bilingual school. And we put it from preschool, elementary school, middle, and high school. And we put it at proficient level. Why we need to put that? Because it's not possible to accept that some families said to National Council and many other authorities, it's not possible to accept a situation that before 7 years, 8 years, we don't have a goal, specify a goal, you know, to be acquired by our students. You should put it something related to that because we have this in international understanding. So we put B2 based on CFR because it was a general understanding that this is completely possible. This is not impossible, it's completely possible. And we have had a lot of material, for example, in our neighbors, and Chile and Argentina and Uruguay, and many other, Mexico, for example, in Spain, and in many other countries that are very close with our conditions here in Brazil. In Portugal, for example, not only in Europe, but here, okay? And of course, we need to put something related to what is the intrinsic aspect related to bilingual education, because this is the first time that we are addressing this problem in Brazil. That's why we put it the necessity of complementary course, because we don't have in our literature, we don't have in our faculties, in our university until now, unfortunately, we don't have training specifically cover these components related to bilingual education. We have seen that many institutions, many education institutions are moving because of our document. But until that, until 1 year ago, we didn't have any notice, any new related to any university or faculty or college, any institution offering this kind of training related to the bilingual education components, or bilingual education atmosphere, and how to work and how to prepare and how to make the things become a reality. We didn't have that. So that's why we put it. But of course, when we have this in our university, in our institution, it won't be necessary anymore. And we put it 120 hours because this is a basic number of hours that we have in our legislation. So nothing was completely without reason, without thinking a lot, and without covering what we have in our nation. Another point of interest is that we discriminated, we separated, because as I said, we didn't have a common understanding about what is bilingual school. Of course, we can say the same thing related to bilingual education, but the point was bilingual school, because we have many institutions call themselves bilingual school without offering what is bilingual school understanding around the world. So we put it clearly in our document, bilingual school is when you offer two a language integrated in components, in curricular components, okay? So what is international school? Because there was also a question about what is international school. International school is a school that offers two possibilities. So when you finish in Brazil, it's exactly the same that if you were in US, if you were in UK, if you're in whatever country we're talking about. So you have two documents when you finish, okay? It's not just when you are using, because we have some institutions that are using some international material. This is not an international school. International school should offer two curriculums related to Brazilian. They should obey Brazilian laws, and of course, they should obey the other countries' law. So they should combine in order to be recognized. When you finish your high school here, for example, you can test yourself in our exam, national exam, and you can test yourself in other exam in other countries. This is international school understanding, and now will be our regulation. And we have bilingual education. If you're not bilingual school, of course you can work in terms of bilingual education because it's open, is a wide understanding about that. So we are offering additional language. There is nothing wrong about that. We are not talking in terms of difference in terms of quality by itself. We are just saying that bilingual school should have a specific organization, should have a specific understanding, and should offer and deliver specific things related to that, because we know that it's more expensive to be a bilingual school. So they should have the right to state that in their marketing, in their propaganda, and these things, because this will make it easy for families to understand, and of course to make contract with this kind of institution. And bilingual education, we are not a bilingual school, but we are offering in a very comprehensive way, in a deep way, but we are not a bilingual education because we are not offering in two language the components of our curriculum, you know. So this difference is necessary so we can have a good environment to see the growing of bilingual education in our country. And of course, we can't forget that we have a law, a positive law in our country. So we should state in law before. So after that, if you not obey the law, you will respond for that. Unless we have this clearly stated in law, you are not obliged to make anything. You are only obliged to make what law says clearly. You should do that or you can't do that. This is our system. This is our positive law in our country. So we haven't had that before our document, and that's why we are suffering pressure from many parts of our country, you know, to states to build, to design a national policy for bilingual education. Another important things that I believe that we try to cover and suggest in our document, because of course we can't answer all the questions related to bilingual education, because it's a wider concept. It requires many other things that we are not allowed to make it, because we have limits to our action, exactly because of the law, because of our LDB. But we put in the first part of our document that we call parecer. We suggest many things, you know. We suggest many things in order to help states, in order to help municipalities, and in order to help school to understand what we are talking about, and to decide their policy, to decide their investment related to bilingual education or bilingual school or international school. And we put it some materials, some discussion about critical things related to bilingual education, and some of them you have here. Pedagogical challenge, you know, methodologies, research, material, tools, assessment, and parental involvement. We have seen this all over the world. Every country who has a bilingual national education says that, and we know it by literature. It's easy to find out information about that. And we ask our Minister of Education and to provide, because it is their job as a Minister of Education, it is their job to provide part of this environment. You know, for example, national assessment. We have nothing in Brazil related to that, related to a national policy. Okay, someone will say, we didn't have until now because we didn't have a national policy. Now we have. Of course, we need the ministry assign the document. They say they will do it because there are other documents, and they have the right to decide the precise moment when they are interested to assign the document, but they say they will. So we are expecting for that. But our nation, we need our Minister of Education make some things that every country is supposed to do in order to make a national policy available for every state and every municipality. This is our interest in this document. we hope that our country can move from one state to another state, and this state we are hoping that will become a reality, is that bilingual education becomes available for every student in our country, okay? Of course, with different modalities, with different arrangements, but we hope that this can become a national policy, exactly as the document says. So the Minister of Education, we ask them to provide, to construct, to design some materials that only they are able to make it. And of course, this will help institutions, this will help schools, because they don't have to make all this investment, okay? So these are some of the key topics that our document says. And finally, I may say that we have, of course, something related to grade, because we never had that before, but I don't think it's so complicated, because when we look around the world, it's easy to see that we have sometimes more requirements than we have here in Brazil, and it's possible. And do not forget that once the document was assigned by Ministry of Education, we have more 1 or 2 years to active that goal, that requirement. So it's easy to see that our teachers have been working with this. They're not will start at this precise moment. They will continue. So they have more 1 or 2 years to be according with that requirements in terms of CFR B2 level. And of course, the student who started in primary education until high school, it's almost impossible for the majority of them do not active B2. And when we look at an international level, it's easy to see and to attest that we are not asking too much. We are asking what we believe are necessary in order that families can see that their investments is according with what they should expect from institution. And on the other hand, the institution have a clear basis, has a clear understanding of our national policy, so they will make the investment, as Farroupilha has says in this discussion, in other institutions, so they can, of course, put it in their marketing, in their propaganda, what they are doing, and families could recognize, because now we have a document. Now we have a national document say what we understand by this thing that until some time ago, people have no sense about it. Now we can say that bilingual education already started to become a national policy in our country, and I do believe that for the next years we will grow in a fast movement, because we know that the potential that we have in our country, and we start to make things with this sense of motivation that we can see 1 year after the document was approved in National Council for Education. We have seen a lot of investment, people asking for course institutions. So a vibration atmosphere related to bilingual education has been invited for many meetings and chats, so many things. So very interesting atmosphere in our country. So I do believe, I do hope that we can continue to improve our bilingual education policy for our country. Thank you very much, and I'm here for eventually questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Ivan. We do have a few questions. If you can give me just 1 minute. The first question is from Kila, and she asks, what are the differences between international school and bilingual school? And thank you so much, Kila, for participating and for asking this very interesting question. Professor Ivan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the question. The main difference is related to certificate, okay? In order to be an international school, you should obey 2 laws, the Brazilian law and the other countries' law. So you will certify students with 2 certificates. That's the difference, you know? So for example, if you have an international school here related to Brazil and England, so this school should deliver at the end of your time of the schooling 2 certificates, one valid in Brazil and another valid in England, in the same, whatever country we are taking. This is the difference. So, of course, an international school is supposed to be a bilingual school at the same time, but not all bilingual school will be international school because of the certification.
Thank you. Kila is also thanking here. Another question came previous from the event. We asked them if they wanted to ask any questions. So here is, do you believe we'll have each time more bilingual schools soon, or you believe it might take longer?
No, I think we have been seeing, in fact, this growing, this movement. I think we are living now. It's easy to see. Just compare 1 year ago. Of course, we are suffering because of pandemic situation and things that are not in our hands. But just look back 1 year before.
True.
And now, so it's easy to see these events and many other events on the web that is easy to find out a lot of information, discussions, and books and papers, and so on, so on, so on. So this attests more than what I'm saying, that we are in living moment about this growing movement of bilingual education. It's easy to see a lot of teachers, for example, in their lives, they are building their persona in the web, for example, to discuss, to share their belief, to share their experience. We haven't done before.
True. And
So
that's why it's important to have these rules and regulations now each time more stronger, right?
Exactly. Now that we have an act, we have a regulation, it's easy to know if you are act correctly or not, what you're supposed to do in order to obey the law. Because without that, some people say, oh, it was better before. No, because without that, families don't know what expect. Students don't know what expect. Any institution, school don't know what investment they should do in order to offer what they are trying to offer. So with a national document, a national act, we know the rules. We know we need rules in order to act as a society. Otherwise, everyone is supposed to say, no, this is my understanding. And the other say, no, this is my understanding. I'm right. It's impossible to live in society without rules. But these rules is not something that you say, no, this is too much. No, this is a basic rules that we have seen in many other countries. And these rules in many other countries has improved the quality of education, not only bilingual education. So why would be different in our country?
Yes, it's a standard, right?
Exactly.
It's a standard for people to follow. Thank you. One more question here from Arthur, from Kila Goulart. A school that have just English in the primary years and starts to have both languages from Fundamental 1, is it a bilingual school?
This school can be, it depends on their plan management. You know, the planning, for example, as I said, the document says this clear. The school, they should discuss, of course, with their community, their decisions, but once they decide, they can plan that. For example, this year, let's suppose we are not in this pandemic situation. Let's think in terms of 2022, for example. This year, we started, for the next year, we will offer this. So there's a possibility to plan this. So the easy answer, yes, it's possible if the institution, the schools, has as a plan. So they will present this to their authorities in their city. So this is our plan. We are going to be a bilingual school because we are going to offer this and this and this. And of course, you can make it year by year because some school started in primary school, for example, and they are growing year by year. Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, it's completely possible.
Okay. One more question. Lots of questions coming. Where can we find Arthur asked about the document, the link for the document with the standards and the directrices. And Alberto has already posted in the chat, Arthur, so I think you can find it there. Okay. So one more question. How long before seeing quality English teaching in public school?
Well, public schools is a little more complicated because we have more than 147,000 schools in Brazil. You know, and we know that we have difference in terms of region, in terms of quality, in terms of budget, in terms of money, in terms of quality of teachers training. So we have a very decentralized system. We have a national, we have a state, and we have municipal, and we have a completely different system in our country. So having said that, I do believe that it's possible growing, you know, year by year, time by time. It's possible to improve, and we have seen that in many different regions. But of course, the challenge is bigger. because of the size. You know, we have more than 80% of our students in public system.
Yes.
You know, it's in fact it's 83%. So it's millions of people. You know, so this is a big challenge. Of course, it's possible. We need more investment from government for the three levels of government: federal, states, and municipal. And we need the society to make pressure, my understanding, to make pressure because it's our right. We should be cry. We should, you know, you should make pressure on their governments, prefecture, municipalities, and everyone in order they should obey the law, because the law says exactly what they're supposed to do. But it's not easy. We should have clearly that it's not easy, but it's possible, because we have seen examples in public school. Good examples, for example, in Londrina, Paraná. We have seen that in Rio de Janeiro, capital. We have seen that in some schools in São Paulo. We have seen that in some schools in Pernambuco. So we have good example in every region of our country. So it's possible, but it's not easy.
Okay. This was from Teacher Leon. She asked this. Now Fabio Fernandes asks, Mr. Siqueira, should we worry about this exponential growing of bilingual schools in the private context, in terms of quality, he means?
No, I think with that document, I think we can expect better atmosphere and better investment and better business, because until now, any institution could say, I'm not against the law because there's nothing on the law. There's no regulation. There's no norm. Now we have, and after the minister assigned, we have a national policy. And many states are, based on this document, are building their documents according to that. So we have seen movement, we have seen challenge, and we have seen response to that challenge in many parts of our country. So I do believe that we are moving from a better atmosphere, a better situation for business, for teachers training, because teachers, of course, they need clearly to choose their path, to choose what they're supposed to do, because there's a lot of required investment for teachers to work in that kind of institution. And of course, investment for families needed to put investment in school. Everyone need to invest. So because of this document, we know clearly what we are trying to achieve. So I think in general, we are going to see better atmosphere, better investment, and better education. That's what we need and we expected. Better quality of education.
And it's everyone's gain, right? Everyone can profit from better education and
there's a space for everyone, because you are not necessarily to be a bilingual school. You can be an excellent school offering a bilingual education.
Yes,
there's nothing wrong about that, because they are public. There are people interested in every layer. You know, there are people for everything. Of course, you should adequate your marketing, your propaganda according to your possibilities.
Yes. One more question. This is from Alberto. Professor Ivan, can you tell us more about the expected standards or levels for learners?
Yeah, this is something very important. Thank you, Alberto, for your excellent question. We have talking about Ministry of Education in order to discuss this. We should start a national discussion, because we need to invite experts. You know, we have talked with INEP, but I should say that this moment is not helping, because we have faced a lot of policy problems in our country. But we have tried as much as possible to start a discussion. In fact, we have this discussion with INEP, because we need to talk with INEP, we need to talk with Minister of Education, and we need to invite Brazilian experts and other international experts in order to design a national policy for that. But until now, unfortunately, we don't have it.
Okay. One more question here. When you talk about, from Flavio Vargas, when you talk about all the schools being bilingual, are you referring to both private and public schools? Don't you think it's a bit difficult that a public school will be bilingual? You just kind of answered to this, right? But you mean all the schools, private and public?
Mm-hmm. I not said all schools being bilingual school. I said bilingual education. It's a little different, you know. Okay. Bilingual education is a policy that we are interested to start. In fact, we have started, but we are interested to spread in our country, because this could lead this could improve our education because of multicultural aspect, because of cognitive improvement of our students, because there's a lot of evidence that this will improve of our education, number one. Number two, there are many possibilities. You not necessarily should be bilingual school. You can understand of bilingual education. As I said, bilingual school are more specific, but we have possibility to see bilingual school in public system, but of course will be few because of the reason that we have said. But we had that, and of course it depends on many things. We have, for example, in some cities, because of municipality made the investment, they have made the investment necessary. But of course we won't see bilingual school in every city. It's possible, one at least in every city, but we are not going to see it in a short time. But another thing is that every school could apply the understanding of bilingual education in order to provide what we are talking about.
Okay, thank you. This is from Alessandra Coutinho. And what are the teacher's qualifications to teach in a bilingual school? What qualifications a teacher needs to teach in a bilingual school in terms of, do they need international certificates, or what types of qualifications?
Mm-hmm. We put it B2 based on CFR or an international level. We don't have this until now national, because we don't have a national policy for that. So schools can choose. Schools that has the right to choose until we have a national act, a national regulation for that. We don't have it. I put it on the document. You can see like there, asking for Ministry of Education, INEP, in order to construct, to design this. But until now, schools has the right to choose their preference, but in an international level. So it should be qualified. Yeah, it's not, you can say, oh, I will invite one or two people here and they will assign that quality. No, this is not what the document says. The document says that the school, every institution could use their right to choose, but on an international level. So we are interested in quality. So there are many possibilities, but they should secure for their students, for their community, the quality of their possibility to choose.
Yeah, so and this related to this, like teachers, she asks, is it setting standards on teachers training? I'm worried to see schools without trained teachers, but does it include anything related to teacher training then?
Yeah, it depends on the school system, it depends the school curriculum, and depend the school decisions. But what the document says is that the school need to certify, the school need to guarantee the quality of their teaching, the quality of their delivering process. That's why we put it assessment for both teachers and students. But how the school can do that, they have many possibilities until now, because we don't have a national tool for that. So the school are free to use their liberty to choose what they want, but they should guarantee quality for both assessment of teachers and students and the process. And of course, we are talking about bilingual schools.
Okay. She continues to ask, is it level of English or teacher training? What we see these days is one or the other. So is it more related to level of English for teachers or more related to teacher training?
Both. Because there's no possibility to guarantee quality from just one side of the coin. You need both. You need quality in terms of teachers training, and you need the quality of teachers level fluency of language, because you can't guarantee that with a person who hasn't enough quality, how could they perform quality? Of course it's possible, but they need time. But with that time, they acquire this quality. So we are talking about the same thing. So we need both. We need a quality in terms of teachers training, and we need a quality in terms of teachers proficiency and fluency.
Okay, Professor Ivan, can you tell us where people can find maybe your any email that they can contact you, or a web page? Because there were questions here if they wanted to get some extra help or counseling. Is it possible?
Yeah, I put it on the chat my email, so you can share with our partners, with our audience. So it's always a pleasure to talk about it and to be part of this changing movement to a better quality to our education, including bilingual education.
Okay, we will be doing this and sharing this with everyone soon. I guess that's most of you have answered all the questions we've had. No more questions coming. Just one more second. I'm sorry, just to make sure there are no other questions. I guess that's all, Professor Ivan. Thank you so much. This was so enlightening, and it gave people the opportunity to really have a nice discussion about this very important topic. And I believe that, like I said before, it's everyone's gain, and we do need and want better better quality in education. So thank you so much for being here and for giving us the opportunity to discuss and talk about this very important topic.
Thank you, Roberta, and Colégio Farroupilha, and Cambridge, and everyone, the audience, people who are following, who are discussing, who are involved in this changing movement from better education for our country. So it's also a pleasure. Have a nice weekend, and take care of yourselves, and take care of those that you love it. So
thank you. Bye. Bye. Okay, everyone. So it is time for our first break. Okay, we'll have 10 minutes for this break. So I suggest that you take this time to stretch your legs, like I said in the beginning, take some rest, get a drink. We will be back in 10 minutes. Okay, so I guess it is 10:28. Actually, we should start as we finished 2 minutes before. We can start back at 10:40, in 10:40, 20 to 11. Okay, so we'll be back here. See you soon. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you are all here and we are ready to continue with our amazing event. Continuing with our schedule, I invite now Alberto Costa to talk about Cambridge exams and their positive impact on students' lives. Alberto is Senior Assessment Manager Americas for Cambridge Assessment English. He has a solid background in teaching English and has worked as an English teacher, academic consultant, and teacher trainer for the teaching qualifications certifications of Cambridge English CELTA and Delta. Welcome, Alberto Costa. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Roberta. Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for being here with us today on a Saturday morning. It's always a pleasure to be talking to teachers, and it's always a pleasure to be here in this event, which was organized beautifully by Colégio Farroupilha, which is an authorized center for Cambridge Assessment English. I could follow the chat while Professor Ivan was giving his talk, and I could be listening to Professor Ivan for hours because of his clarity and all the ideas he has helped and worked very hard with a group of people to put together so that we now have this document, Diretrizes para a Educação Plurilingue. I think it was a very, very important document for our education. And there are very, very important points there that I believe will help our country to make a difference in education. And as he said himself, it's not just about being a bilingual school. It's about a number of things. It's about a number of effects. And I think there is somehow a connection with what Colégio Farroupilha has been doing in their history with the Cambridge exams and the impact, the positive impact all the implementation has had on the students, on the results, and on the fact that students now leave the school with the possibility of prove their skills to the world. I'm now adding here, as part of my speech, our mission as Cambridge Assessment English, which is to help learners to learn English and prove their skills to the world. And I'm sure that students from Colégio Farroupilha and from the prep centers that are supported by Colégio Farroupilha can now do once they have developed their skills and they are ready to, to prove it out there in the world with a certificate. This is very, very important. So good morning to you all. And once again, thanks for your presence this Saturday morning. Today, we are going to talk about the Cambridge exams and their positive impact on the students' lives. I think we have a long history of impact to share with you. I mean, Cambridge Assessment English, as you know, is a department from the University of Cambridge, and it has existed for over a century, which means there is a lot of data, a lot of good stories, and a lot of evidence of positive impact in many parts of the world. So I'm going to move to my slides here to give you an outline of what we are going to talk about today. So we're going to start talking about the principles of good practice from Cambridge Assessment English and how those principles are present in the exams. We are going to talk about impact. I believe that after hearing Professor Ivan, I think impact is a very, very important word, and we're going to explore a little bit of what it is. It's going to be basically an overview because impact means we have a lot to talk about, and 30 minutes would not be enough. We are going to give you this snapshot of potential assessment effects by stakeholder groups. So when we're talking about an educational system and how we can implement certain changes, we can establish certain standards. This can impact the many different stakeholders in the community. So we're going to look at those stakeholders more clearly, and we're going to talk about some steps to help us look ahead into the future. I think after the document now from the Ministry of Education, Brazil will have a lot to do in terms of planning so that we can look ahead for a brighter future. We're going to start with a quick question for you. I have this acronym here, VRIP, V-R-I-P. Can you type in the chat what you think the words, the letters stand for? So, I mean, you don't have to, if you don't know, don't worry, you can give a guess. We are not going to grade you, you're not going to lose marks, but I would like you to participate a little bit and try and give me some of the possibilities of what those letters stand for. So I'm going to go to the chat and see what guesses we have here. What do you think the letters stand for? Oh, I think my microphone has a bit of an issue. Okay, thank you, Kayla, for pointing this out. Can you type in the chat what you think the letters stand for? We have one guess here. Good. The answers are coming through. Okay, please. Any more guesses? Okay, I think Kayla has a very good guess. Excellent. Márcio, what a good guess. You are very, very close, Márcio. Very, very close. Yes, I for impact, by all means. Yes, that's good. Wow, Lillian, well done. You've got most things right. Just one little thing. Okay, let's go and check what those letters stand for. So VRIP, well, V stands for validity. It's one of the principles of good practice. And by validity, we mean are our exams an authentic test of real-life English? This is something that Cambridge works very, very hard through research and through collecting data to make sure that the exams focus on authentic test of real-life English. Real-life English means communication skills, making sure that students are able to communicate and that they can demonstrate that they have those competencies for communicating in the different skills and in the different contexts. R stands for reliability. So by reliability, we mean, do our exams behave consistently and fairly? So fairness is one of the key principles that is taken into consideration in the exams and through the exams, so that students in different contexts, in different countries, they have a positive experience and that they are assessed consistently, right? So I for impact, it's going to be the focus of our talk today. So do our assessments have a positive effect on teaching and learning? This is something that is constantly investigated, and nowadays more and more, firstly because there are many more students taking the exams nowadays. Just to give you an overview from 2019, before the pandemic, 7 million candidates took the exams around the world in 1 year. So that is a lot. So there is a lot of research checking the impact and whether the impact is positive. P for practicality. In other words, do the assessments meet learners' needs within available resources? So is it practical for the learners in terms of meeting their needs? And is there support and resources for the learners? Of course, we have here 4 key areas. Each of those areas means we could spend hours and hours discussing, because researchers have been studying and publishing papers and reports on each of those areas for decades. But we have another letter which is not there, which is quality. Quality is very important. It has to do with how we, Cambridge, plan, deliver, and check that we provide excellence in all of those fields, in all of those 4 areas. So it's a lot of work by a number of specialized professionals in Cambridge and around the world, making sure that the exams will do what they are expected to do for the learners. But for the purposes of this talk, we are going to focus on impact. Again, do our assessments have a positive effect on teaching and learning? When we're talking about impact, I think we need to go back to a word which has to do with impact. Sometimes this word is used interchangeably, but it's not necessarily impact. Washback, as you can see here, is part of the impact. So it has to do with the possible effects of tests on teaching and learning, right? So washback is seen as a continuum. It's not something that is part of one single experience of sitting external exams or international exams, but it's part of a continuum. It has to do with this impact that it's going to have on teaching and learning, especially during preparation for the exams. So when we're talking about washback, we want to check whether the washback is or will be negative or harmful. That is, it will impact teaching and learning in such a way that learners will not be able to learn, develop, and demonstrate certain skills because there is a special type of preparation, or there is a belief that students should be prepared for the test only, and then all the rest related to education, like formative assessment, making sure that students work and develop skills, work together, work in groups. They talk about things that make sense to them. All those things are disregarded, right? So it can be negative or harmful. It can be neutral. We don't want washback to be negative, and we don't want it to be neutral either. We want washback, above all, to be positive and beneficial for the learners, for the teachers, and for the educational system above all, right? So, in other words, we are talking about some of those factors here. We are talking about the impact of the washback on the individual learners, on teachers' attitudes and behavior. If you have a context where teachers are teaching to the test only, that can be quite harmful in the sense that other elements of language learning will be disregarded. We are talking about the washback in classroom environment. We want it to be positive in a way that students feel motivated to learn, that they understand that they are developing the skills and they feel the confidence to communicate, and they feel also the sense of achievement. And it's also to do with the choice and use of teaching and learning materials to help students develop those skills, right? So washback has to do with the micro universe of the teacher, the learner, the classroom, the teaching practices, the assessment practices as well. So when we're talking about impact, I think we sort of zoom in, we amplify the scope, because impact has to do with a number of things that are related to the universe of the classroom, but it goes beyond this universe as well. So it has to do with the impact on the career or life changes of individual test takers. So students take the test, they get their certificate, and then they're going to go forward in their lives to develop, to do courses, to get a job, to get a promotion in the job. So it has to do with how those experiences will impact their career, their future, the opportunities in education and employment. It has to do with impact on educational systems, what kind of arrangements will need to be made in terms of curriculum, in terms of materials, in terms of continuous professional development of the teachers, how to involve the families in this process. And it has to do with impact on society more widely. So how the results of the tests are going to be used so that decisions can be made in terms of school curriculum planning, funding allocation for professional development, for example, for the inclusion of other resources, immigration policies. I mean, some countries will request that you have a certain level of English for you to migrate, either to study or to live. And also for licensing professionals. We know that we have special qualifications for example, doctors and nurses, if they are to work in an English-speaking country. And of course, the impact goes further to affect publishers, how they're going to prepare the test preparation materials and materials in general. And of course, the impact on institutions, how they're going to run the preparation courses, making sure that they focus on the beneficial washback and that they don't just prepare to the test, but they focus a lot on developing the skills that need to be developed, for life, really. So we have a diagram here which shows impact and washback. Washback is very important, but it's one part of impact, since impact goes beyond the classroom, and we want it to be positive and outside the school as well. So in terms of impact, Luciane started her talk this morning talking about the impact all the implementation of the exams had, Colégio Farroupilha. So in 2010, they had a number of students at a certain level of language. So they established different parameters. They established higher linguistic targets so that the students could sit more advanced level exams. And now students can finish the school with a C2 certificate in their hands, right? Of course, we are talking about a very, very well organized project from one school, but I would like to make a connection with what's happening now in Brazil when Professor Ivan was talking about the guidelines for plurilingual education. This is a very, very important starting point in our country where we now have some clear guidelines to follow. It's not the case of us agreeing or disagreeing for the time being, because I'm sure those things, they tend to be reviewed in the future. There will be additions to it, there will be changes to it. So at the moment, with the document that we have, it means that we know where we need to turn to, where do we need to invest resources, where do we need to invest efforts in order to make changes and establish the goals and make sure that we work in all the different areas to achieve those goals, right? So this is an example of what happened with Colégio Farroupilha. When we compare, for example, with the expected levels of learners in the guidelines for plurilingual education, for example, students at sexto ano, for a school that wants to be bilingual, they should reach level A2. Students at nono ano, they are expected to reach level B1, and students at terceiro ano do ensino médio level B2. There is also a expected standard for teachers to be at level B2 minimum. But as I said, those targets, those goals, they are the goals for now. They are the starting point. It means that, for example, what Colégio Farroupilha has managed to achieve nowadays is a result of a lot of work that happened, and it didn't change from day to night. There was a gradual process where a lot of work happened in many different areas, so that nowadays they could come to such an impact in terms of language development. I remember in the event, the Cambridge Experience event last year, students who left Colégio Farroupilha, they reported that they had that they felt comfortable facing the challenges of recruitment processes for work or for higher education outside Brazil. And they were really comfortable talking about their experiences in English. And we did this impact study that we reported on last year. And one of the things students said is that they don't fear the day of the exam because it's so part of the process. It's as important as everything else that is done in the school throughout the year, that they don't see this as the day to be nervous. It's just part of what they have to do, right? This leads us to consider, for example, all the different areas where impact can happen. So we have here in this snapshot a group of stakeholders involved in education. We have the students, we have the teachers, we have the parents, we have the educational systems. And I think when we compare Brazil 1 year ago without the guidelines and Brazil this year with the guidelines, it's much clearer to understand which role each of those stakeholders will need to play in the process, right? So when we look at, for example, the students, if, for example, in your school or in your language institute, you want, if you don't do this yet, and you want to implement the exams, you need to consider how this is going to impact students' motivation, their behavior towards the exam, and of course, and above all, their learning outcomes. The purpose is not to say here that the exams will be miraculous and will immediately solve all the problems in the institution. This honestly doesn't happen, because when you implement something like this in your educational system, you have to make sure that a lot of work is done with students, with families, and with teachers for the benefit of the learners and also for the experience to become positive, right? With any exam, really. So in terms of students, sharing with students what the exam is, what it looks like, the kind of teaching practices that will happen and will eventually lead the students to feel confident in demonstrating those competencies for the exam will impact on motivation, and of course they will feel more confident, more motivated, and to behave in a way that will be positive for them when they come to do the exams, right? And of course, focusing on learning outcomes that will lead students to actually demonstrate that they have good communication skills. They might be able to communicate even if they don't know the specific pronunciation of the verb think, or if they don't know that the past of think is thought. But they can still communicate, and I think it's very important to take this into consideration, leading the students to communicate, and of course, as you do so, you work on the different areas of, for example, accuracy of grammar, accuracy of pronunciation, but not focusing primarily on accuracy, and not giving the students the opportunity to develop communication skills. When we're talking about teachers, if we say, for example, that the exams focus on students demonstrating that they can communicate in real life, this has impact on teaching practices as well. If teaching practices are all about teaching grammar solely, of course, the students will not be able to demonstrate that they have good communication skills. They can, they can memorize a whole table of irregular verbs, but that doesn't mean that they will be able to apply all this knowledge in communication. So the teaching practices will need also to enable students to develop those skills, build their confidence in communication, and build the confidence of the teachers in developing those skills. And of course, this will impact professional development. Teachers involved in exams, they are also involved in assessment. They discuss assessment in more detail. Some teachers become examiners as well for the speaking paper, which means this is a step in professional development because they need to work with criteria, training, retraining, and eventually this impacts on teaching practice, making sure that teachers address criteria in their teaching practices, for example, and not only develop the criteria, but share criteria with learners. One of the questions we received prior to this event, because you could ask questions, was about the assessment of speaking, the development of speaking skills, and it was also about rubrics for assessing speaking. One of the things that we use to assess speaking is a set of rubrics, and they can serve as a tool for teachers to use in the classroom while helping the students develop those skills. I'm using speaking as an example, but it's also true for writing skills and also helping the students to develop the other skills such as listening and reading, right? So there is a lot of professional development that is impacted by this. Thinking of impact in terms of Brazil, what the document that Professor Ivan talked about establishes for professional development for teachers, I think it's a very, very sound initial step for teachers to develop certain skills in order to be able to teach with confidence. And eventually, I think this will improve teaching practices, and hopefully the washback will be positive in the future. Parents also play a very important role in this process because they need to engage with the school, and there should be a lot of communication for that purpose, right? And also, if you are in a school, you teach young learners, teenagers, and you need the families to support with this as well. They are the ones who will set the alarm clock early in the morning and who will be in charge of making sure that learners are doing their homework, for example, that they are engaging as much as they should. And they're the ones we teachers turn to when we need students to become better committed, right? So they need to be involved and they need to understand why the school is offering certain opportunities, such as allowing the students to sit an international exam to get a recognized certificate, right? It's very, very important support, and this, they need to be involved in this process as well. It's not just about paying for a test, but it's all the impact that it will have on learning, on the learners and, of course, in their futures. And educational systems also, they are impacted when you make some changes, when you establish parameters such as making sure that students reach level X, Y, or Z in the Common European Framework. Because for that to happen, you need professional development with the teachers, you need communication with students and parents, but you also need to make internal changes such as making sure that the curriculum will help you to reach those linguistic targets, right? Learning materials, are they appropriate? Do they help students to develop those skills, or it's just sheer grammar practice? And of course, allocation of funding for the teams in charge of the administration, because if you need to implement things, you need to consider budget, and so you see the impact goes beyond what happens in the classroom only, right? This is not to say that because you want to use the exams or you want to increase your levels of proficiency at certain moments of your program, it's going to be very, very hard work for you. It's something that is part of education. I mean, for education to improve at national level, Professor Ivan mentioned today, the document comes as a very good reference. Now we have clearer directions in terms of what to do, of what to implement. So it's the same in your own institution. You need to consider all those areas. You need, or at least to understand that all those areas will be impacted for the experience to be positive for everyone involved here, the learners, the parents, the school, society as a whole. So in terms of looking ahead, make sure that for you to implement the exams and for the students to be successful and for the experience to be positive, diagnose the current levels of proficiency and establish realistic linguistic targets for your program, right? There is no right answer for that. I mean, at this moment, Colégio Farroupilha is at a specific standard. Your standard could be lower, but it's not a problem as long as your targets are realistic for your context, right? So we need to start by diagnosing the levels of proficiency of learners, teachers, making sure that you know what the next step will be in terms of levels, right? But make it realistic. And aim for positive washback. So don't focus just on the day of the exam. Before the exam, during preparation, during the academic year, make sure that you include a number of different assessment practices. So be generous with feedback and be specific with feedback as well to learners, and make feedback regular for learners. So make sure that you give constant feedback on their skills development. Make sure that if you have had your exam sessions, the process does not stop there. We always see this as a cycle. I mean, the scores from the exam will give you a lot of information about the kinds of changes you may need to implement for the next cohort of candidates. So, use the scores, and use this evidence-based approach for you to make new changes. So you have some scores. You might see that overall, the previous cohort was very weak at listening skills, so maybe you might need to include more listening practice in your teaching practices, in your curriculum. And also understand and try to imagine what kind of impact you want this to have on the career and life chances of individual students. It's very important to consider what they're going to do next when they reach that level and get their certificate, or when they leave school. You need to bear this in mind in order to make adjustments to your program to give students this preparation, not only for the exam, but for life, really. They will be using all those competencies and skills and their certificates for a purpose in the future, right? Since we are talking about evidence and taking an evidence approach to this, measure the results along the way. I think one of the things the exams can give you is this amount of data through which you can, you can base your decisions on those bits of information from the exams. We have portals, for example, that allow prep centers to collect data and compare performance, their students' performance with performance in the country and performance in the world. It will indicate which areas the school is really strong, which areas the school will probably need to make certain adjustments. So keep measuring the results along the way. And above all, integrate learning and assessment. The exam is not the only assessment. It's not your achievement test, right? You have your assessment along the way throughout the school year, through a number of instruments that you use and a number of practices as well. You have the homework, you have the projects that the students do. So make sure that you integrate learning and assessment, because above all, I think the outcomes we want to get to are the learning outcomes, right? And you will hear a lot more about integrating learning and assessment in the next session with Ben Knight and Green Hughes, our dear guest speakers. So I suppose from now on, Roberta, I have some references for you. I believe the team in Colégio Farroupilha will make this available for you. Most of the references here are free access, right? In case you want to find out more about impact. And with that, Roberta, I think I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Alberto. It's very good. It's always good to hear from you to participate in your talks. And some people even made comments here in the chat about how nice it is to listen to you talking about the different topics. So, Alberto, everyone, if you have any questions, please type on the chat. There are people helping us here. But we do have a few questions that came before the event, as we asked them to send us questions that they wanted us to ask. So you talked about assessing students and the positive impact, and you also talk about the impact on behavior on the students themselves. So how can we here there is a question talking about motivation, especially considering these times, right, where this very challenging time. So how can you keep students motivated, considering this also an impact on their behavior, because this is something, right, related to their behavior?
Yes. Well, because we are living a pandemic in our generation that we have never lived before, we don't have a recipe for those things, but I believe that we can use assessment as a way of motivating the learners. And when I say assessment here, I'm not directly talking about the exams, but what you can do in the classroom in order to make sure that students engage more. I think one of the things we need to consider is that, and teachers have learned, in the hard way, that teaching remotely is not like teaching in the classroom. So we need to make a lot of adjustments to our dynamics. And I think also what we need to consider here is giving the students specific targets with very specific criteria, and always making sure that we are starting small and leading the students to more challenging tasks, right? I think students, I mean, they lack motivation, but the whole situation is so unusual that it's difficult to come up with one solution. But use assessment to motivate. Always give students, for example, if you are giving them project or tasks, give students more than one opportunity to do something, so they feel more confident. If they are writing something, give them the chance to redraft at least twice. If you want them to do speaking projects, work with them in the rehearsal. Assess them for their efforts in the rehearsal. Praise every single effort they make, because I think this will, in the end, impact on motivation positively.
Yes. Confidence as well, right?
Yeah.
Roberto. So one more question here. What are the limitations of the assessment of the speaking skills? They ask specifically about speaking skills.
Yes, I think speaking is one of those things that some people tend to feel not confident, or either because they are shy, or because they will have this feeling that they will be immediately judged by their speech. I think one of the things that we need to consider for speaking is the kind of environment that we provide and that we create with learners. I think for speaking to happen more frequently, I think students need to feel that they are in a safe environment where they don't have the sense of being judged, where they don't have the sense of being corrected all the time, and always making sure that when we start speaking, it's not about putting the student on the spot. In the same way that we help students with writing skills by giving them frames of texts, we need to do the same with speaking. Speaking has an added element when we compare with writing, the element of pronunciation. So providing good pronunciation practice, giving the students the opportunity to practice, to feel confident, always value what students can do and not focus what they cannot do. When we create a positive environment, I think speaking will become, more frequent in class. I don't know if I have time, but this week I had the opportunity to talk to a group of over 200 students in school. They were all kind of nono ano, primeiro ano do ensino médio. And then I said, well, they are teenagers. They are using their cameras. I don't know how they are going to behave. So, before thinking of opening my camera and asking them questions, I gave them a number of activities about questions. And in the end, I used the questions to ask them questions. Turns out I couldn't do anything else because they had so many questions to ask me that they created themselves. I think it has to do with this approach that you create an environment that is positive, and then students will speak up.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you. We have time for one more question. First, we have a comment. In my situation, Laetitia says, teaching in a medium-sized city in the center of Brazil, the impact of the exam is limited to a question of social standing instead of a real understanding of the benefits for life. It is quite a challenge, but we do need to keep showing how positive those impacts are. This impact is, right, Alberto?
Yeah, I think also it has to do with bringing or shedding some light, or bringing information to a community. For example, at school, what do the other students do with those certificates? Especially nowadays, where you are in a place, but you are at the same time anywhere in the world, because people are communicating online more and more. So also showing that even though they are located somewhere in Brazil, it means they can communicate, with the whole world. Not only that, a lot of people now are getting jobs in companies outside Brazil, but they are in Brazil working in their place, probably in a beach house, but they are working for a company elsewhere, because this is what the world is like nowadays. So shedding some light into the results, the positive results for learners, I think it would be nice to bring that to the community.
Alberto, we have, actually time is up, but we have one last question. So if you could answer it very quickly, do you think that it is important to engage the parents, explaining them about the importance of the test for having their help to also focus on the process we teachers want to offer to students? Alessandra Coutinho asks.
I will say that very bluntly, yes. As a teacher, I have been doing that all my life. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's possible with good communication and making sure that we bring the results to parents as well. Parents want good education for their kids, so they will eventually realize it is important.
Thank you, Alberto. Again, thank you 1,000 times for being so kind and helpful and share your ideas with us. Now, before our second and last break, we'll watch two short videos, and so keep tuned.
Carmen Sanchez, Pedagogical Coordinator of Instituto Cultural de Idiomas, which is a Cambridge Exam Preparation Center in Santana do Livramento. First of all, on behalf of Edelcia Maidana França, our head, and myself, I'd like to express our gratitude to Colégio Farroupilha, Cambridge English Authorized Exam Center, and especially to Luciana Calcara, its manager, for the opportunity of participating of this event that will certainly be a success as everything organized by them. We've been asked to say some words about our staff. Honestly, it is not difficult for us to speak about them. I will start saying it's a very hard-working team whose main characteristic is that 95% of the teachers have been our students. And this may explain, among other reasons, their engagement and commitment at work. Academically speaking, we may say that our teachers have reached very high levels. In fact, some of them have certificates in CELTA and Delta. To be fair, we should say that Cultural have always encouraged all the teachers to get them, offering as much support as possible, and will go on doing it. See you at Cambridge Experience 3rd edition.
Hello, everyone. Now it's time for our second break. Let's take some time and we'll be back in 10 minutes, okay? 11:40. Please, we'll wait for you here for Ben and Glenn presentation. You can't miss it.
Instituto Superior de Educação Ivoti integrated the TKT Models 1, 2, and 3 into the curriculum of our undergraduates who are studying to become English teachers. Not only does it improve their linguistic level, but it also enhances their methodological knowledge. We are very proud of offering this international certification in our Letras Português e Inglês course. We are sure it makes our students outstand among others.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for keeping with us. And finally, for our last presentation, I invite Ben Knight and Glenn Hughes for their talk on integrating learning and assessment in the classroom. Ben is Director for Language and Pedagogy Research at Cambridge University Press. He leads on using his high-quality academic research to develop more effective learning materials and resources. With his expertise in curriculum development and pedagogical research, he helps to underpin Cambridge's educational resources with research-based insights and conceptual models. Glenn Hughes is Head of Assessment Quality and Validity at Cambridge Assessment English. Glenn's team coordinate and participate in the job of ensuring that our tests have positive impact and reflect a learner's language ability. Glenn is also working with colleagues at Cambridge University Press to integrate high-quality assessment into learning products. Be very welcome, Ben and Glenn. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roberta, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. So we're going to swap back and forth. As Roberta mentioned, we're here to talk to you today about integrating learning and assessment in the classroom. What we will talk about, let me just check that we can move on. So what we want to talk about is some principles that lie behind the assessment in the classroom, both the assessment that you do and some of the assessments that we can provide and help you with, and also give you some practical techniques and examples. And what we hope we can do for you today is that the information we give you will help you understand a little bit more about how theory relates to practice when it comes to classroom assessment, and to have more confidence in your ability to integrate assessment into your teaching. So, this is always the bit where the slideshow freezes a little bit. Here we go. So, assessment. At the end of the day, for me, I've worked for Cambridge Assessment English for 18.5 years, and people get a bit frightened by assessment, and I always think, well, the end of the day, assessment is just measurement. It's nothing to be frightened about, is it? But then actually, I've got some measuring devices there, and actually measurement can be a frightening thing. Finding out where you are, it can be helpful, it can be supportive, but it can also be quite a challenging thing for the people doing the assessing and for the people on the on the receiving end of the information. So there's lots of emotion around how we tell people where they are in terms of their English, how we tell people information. Broadly speaking, I mean, often particularly when people think of us as Cambridge Assessment English as an exam board, people think about tests. People think about assessment as in this thing that you have to revise for that causes you anxiety. Scantron, optical recognition sheets, and sitting in halls. There's way too many people, way too close together in that hall. That when I selected that, first of all, I thought that might be a slightly anxiety-inducing picture, but it's a little bit nostalgic now, almost. But there you are. But this is what people think of as assessment. But as you as teachers know, assessment comes in many forms. As you as teachers know, you are measuring, assessing, making judgments, making inferences about your learners all the time, in lessons, at the end of lessons, when you're doing marking in between lessons, all the time. And the picture in the middle there is it's assessment. It's chefs. They're tasting the soup. By the time they've put it out in front of the customer in the restaurant, it's too late to be tasting the soup. But that's another form of assessment, because then the customer is making their own judgment. But assessment is also about thinking about what you need to do and thinking about, okay, what's the next bit of the process? How do I adjust what I'm doing? And the last picture to me illustrates the benefits of failure, as it were. So here's this guy. He's just tried to skateboard down that banister. Skateboards on the floor. But the skateboarding, things like this are great examples of the fact that success comes after thousands of attempts, and every attempt, every time you fall off, you adjust and you learn and you realize why you've done it. So the power of self-assessment and the power of using the knowledge gained from assessment to get better. So assessment comes in many shapes and sizes, and with many different bits of terminology, which can make it sometimes a little daunting for people, because assessment for learning-oriented assessment, we talk about summative and formative assessment, but are they two completely different things? Can a summative assessment be used formative? All of these things, I think, sometimes can cause some confusion, particularly when the same term is used differently in different contexts. I guess to me, it comes back to why. Like I said, assessment is about measuring. So assessment is about getting information, hence the data that we have there in the background. Why do we want this information? Why is it useful? So we can say it's kind of to keep track, to know where people are, to highlight problems and mistakes, to apply a bit of pressure, to get people focused, as it were, to say, come on, and to highlight things that aren't working. Now I look at that and I think that's all true of assessment, but we can probably frame it in a slightly more positive way. So when we're keeping track, it's to help you decide where you can focus your efforts, both you as teachers and learners and all of that. So, and also, when we're talking about highlighting problems and mistakes, actually we can frame that more positively. It helps your students to know what they need to work on, like the skateboarder, like the people tasting the soup. To apply pressure, well, okay. Maybe not so much. It's difficult to frame that one positively. But what we want to do is use assessment and to use the information to keep them motivated to learn, to see the progress that they've made, to see, well, oh, actually, I have learned something, and to highlight the things that aren't working. It's about, so that this is the bit about assessment as the part of feedback on the learning process. So I'm doing this thing, but this isn't quite working. So how can I use assessment to improve myself as a learner? At this point, I'm going to hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Glyn. Are you able to pass over control of the slides?
I don't think I can. I can't see a means of doing that. I will pay very close attention and we'll move on when you're ready to move on.
Okay.
And just poke me if I don't.
Okay. Okay. So, hi everybody. Yeah, we're in Cambridge, sunny Cambridge, and we're really disappointed that we are not in Brazil. But here we are. Really nice to talk to you. So as Glyn has been saying, there are lots of reasons why assessment is really useful. It has a lot of purposes, a lot of benefits. But how can you do assessment well? As a teacher in the classroom, what can you do to improve the way you do assessment? So we've suggested that there are 7 ways that you can improve your assessment in the classroom. And we're going to go through these in detail. First of all, you need to be clear about the point, the learning point that you're assessing. Secondly, you need to check where your students are before teaching. Thirdly, you need to be able to choose the right task or activity for the assessment. Fourthly, you need to give targeted feedback. And fifthly, you need to tell them what to do next after the assessment. Sixthly, you need to be able to keep them feeling positive about learning through the assessment. And finally, you want to be able to develop their own self-assessment skills so that they can assess themselves even when you're not there. Okay, so that's what we want you to be able to do. We want you to be able to become brilliant at those 7 things. That's fine. Thanks, Glyn. Okay, so the first one was the importance of being clear about the learning point. It's very easy to put a test together which seems relevant to what you've been teaching, but it's not clear exactly what the learning point is that you're focused on. So just to get you thinking about this, I'm going to ask you to do something where you need to put your answers to my question in the chat box, in the comments. So if you can just get your typing fingers ready. Yeah, thank you. Get your typing fingers ready. And so what I want you to do is to look at this particular activity here and think, if you were teaching this, what is the learning point in this exercise, in these sets of questions? I think I can think of 3. So if you can just suggest what you think the point for the students that you would want to assess in this. So I'm keeping an eye on the comments box, hoping that you're going to put some comments in. Someone's asking, is it interchange? I can't remember, actually. It might be. So what's the learning point in that? I suspect you're warming up, and so I think we'll just move. Can you click once, Glyn? Yeah. Okay. Oh, we're good. They're coming through now.
Yeah, I clicked once and they all came up.
Oh, they all came. Okay, great. So you've got the answers, and I can see people have got them. Umberto's got it. Question word, simple present, question structure, yeah, and routine, auxiliary verbs, etc. Or simply talking about work could be the thing. Okay, so you got it. Can you click on the next one, Glyn? So here's another one. If you were using this, what would you say the learning point is? Yeah.
I wonder if there's a delay on the chat, Ben.
Yeah, I think there's a slight delay there. Okay. So coming on to the next one. Yeah, describing a house, describing where you're living, vocab for furniture. Okay, fine. I'm really happy if you put your answers in, that's great. It helps you to engage, and also sometimes it's helpful for other people as well. Okay, can you click on to the next one? So the second point was you can use assessment. You should use assessment before you're teaching, not just afterwards. And so when we're teaching, we really want to focus our teaching on what they need to learn. And so assessment before teaching is really useful. I've picked out a particular activity here. I think this is from Evolve. And if you look at this, you can see at the beginning, there's a pair work activity before this reading activity. What kinds of things do you enjoy spending money on and why? Now, in this particular one, you could say the purpose of that activity is to activate the student's language on that topic. And that's true. But also as a teacher, you can use it as an opportunity to evaluate how good their language is on this topic. What are the things that they're trying to say which they just are struggling with because they don't have the vocabulary or they don't have the phrases needed to be able to say what they want to say on this topic. So it's a kind of hidden assessment that you can use to help you direct your teaching in the next part. Okay, so some of your answers are starting to come through. I've just been told that there is naturally a delay on the comments here. So I'm going to trust that you're putting in your answers, and then I'm going to move on. So Glyn, next one. Yep. So another way that you can kind of activate or get to know what people know in advance of a topic is using KWAL system. I'm not sure if this is popular in Brazil. In some countries it's more widely used. If you're going to start on a new topic, maybe it's a listening or a reading text or in the unit, one of the ways you can do is to ask the students to write down, first of all, what they know already, and then what they would like to know before they engage with the topic, and then afterwards what they actually learned. And again, it's just so you might take a topic, it might be a country that you're going to read about, another country. So what do they know about it already, etc. And it's just an opportunity for you to assess what are the things, not just the knowledge, but what are the things that they're able to express in advance of addressing that topic. Okay, next one, Glyn. Okay, so then the third area that we want to kind of tune up your skills on in assessment is thinking about what's the best task or activity to assess the student's learning. And now the first thing to think about, well, what are your options? What are the different ways that you can assess students' learning? And the thing that people tend to think of first is simply a written test. Get some questions, they write the answers. But there are other ways of evaluating your students' learning and their language. Can you, in the chat box, in the comments section, can you think of 5 other activities that you could use apart from a written test? I'm going to give you 20 seconds to type something in. Oral test, yeah. So just speaking to them, yeah. A video recording, yeah, that's a nice one. Okay, let's move on, Glyn. So here are some things, presentations, okay? So it'll be interesting to see if your answers come through as I'm saying my suggestions. So one is traffic lights, where you just ask students, red, amber, red, yellow, green, which about how comfortable they feel about the thing that you've been teaching. So maybe it's a grammar point or area of vocabulary. Do they feel they've mastered it? Green, not sure, yellow, or if they're struggling, red. And I know that in primary schools, for example, they sometimes have red, yellow, green pieces of paper which they hold up when the teacher asks them. Interview was, someone said, oral test, basically just asking the students is a quick and easy way. For some types of for some kinds of language, just a quiz. A lot of people are familiar with Kahoot, which is really good. And there are, of course, other types of quiz programs. A portfolio, collecting together examples of what they've been doing. Just observing them. So asking them to do an activity, maybe a little bit, some discussion, and then just watching them. And then giving them a project to do where they have to use the language which they've been learning. So there's a number of ways. Yeah, someone's talked about gamification. That's another one. A performance, like a dialogue. And I think that's, I would also talk about role plays. I think role plays are quite nice ways of getting people to test out their language. Okay, then the next one, Glyn. Okay, so thinking of all those different ways, well, which ones are more suitable for different types of learning? Here we've got 4 different learning points. The first one's a nice, pure grammar point, not enough, too much, too many. If you wanted to evaluate that, which one would you use? Yeah, I can see coming through the comments, the answers to the previous question, and there's some nice things like, just talking about it. That was the sense of interview, was just talk to them. And quizzes is another good quiz game. Yeah. So Luana thinks it works better than Kahoot. Okay. Okay, so if you look at these different ones, I would say for something like a grammar point, often it is a quiz. Is often an easy way of testing that. If you're actually teaching someone a more communicative thing, like asking someone about their plans for the weekend, that's the learning point. Then role plays are often quite good, or just that speaking to them, the interview type of approach. Number 3, understanding someone, giving directions, that very functional thing, I think is definitely, role plays are really nice ways of evaluating that. And then vocabulary for illnesses, I think is particularly really good for Kahoot or quizzes or any of those platforms that you might use. Okay, next one, Glyn. Okay, so then I think we're on the 4th point now, that about giving feedback. The way that you give feedback can really improve the value of the assessment you're making. So you evaluate how they're doing, but then you have to decide how to give the feedback. And there are 3 points here. The first one is that you want to balance encouragement and correction. So correction obviously is telling them what they need to improve. Encouragement is identifying the things that they've got right, because it's very easy to overwhelm students by just pointing out all the errors. They need that to improve, but they also need to keep their motivation going. Second point, then the more specific you can be, obviously the clearer it is, the easier it is to adapt and to learn. So very general statements are not so helpful. Next one. And then finally, to help students to correct themselves. Now we're going to look at those 3 points with a bit more detail. So I just picked this out. This is this is a cartoon which I like, and which kind of shows that if you want to improve behavior, you have to be specific. Next one. Yeah. So an example. Let's think about this. Students are doing a group activity. So you've got your students, you've organized them into a group. They're discussing which is the best place for a tourist to visit in their town. Okay, so you've got them doing that group activity. Now you as a teacher are listening to them. What's your approach going to be to giving them feedback to what you're hearing them say as they're speaking? Yeah, and Rihanna has mentioned, yes, agrees with me. That's great about not traumatizing our poor students. Okay, I think Glyn, we'll move on, and I'll hope the answers correlate with the ones I'm suggesting. So number 1 is this quite common technique to give delayed feedback. Don't interrupt people when they're speaking, especially when it's a communicative activity. Just collect the feedback to give at the end. Always remember to say positive things. If people are managing to communicate, that's an achievement, and you really want to to highlight that and to make people feel that they're achieving something. Next one. And I like this technique. Just you collect up some of the errors, but write some of them on the board that you've heard, some of the errors, and then ask the class together to correct them. It kind of takes away the embarrassment of correcting individuals, and it also gives them a chance to correct it themselves, which makes them feel better about themselves. Okay, so how could you give feedback for these activities? I don't think I'm going to ask you this, but students doing a show and tell at the front of the class. I think that's a particularly stressful thing for your students, and you really don't want to traumatize them at the end of that by telling them all the mistakes they've made. I think that's one where you have to be particularly sensitive about the positive side. And personally, I would do delayed feedback at the end in the similar way we said to the group one. Actually, let's go on to the next one, I think, Lynn. Yeah, so this is what about similar thing with giving feedback on texts. So in this text here, I think you could identify 10 errors. I'm not going to make you identify all those. Just give you a little time to read through it, though. To Andrea, thank you for your email, etc. Now, if you as a teacher, you manage to identify those 10 errors, would you then get your red pen and underline all 10 errors? Maybe not. Maybe what you would do is choose just a couple to give feedback on and try and say one positive thing about the writing. Okay, next one, Clint. Yeah, this is an interesting question. So as a teacher, your students often want you to give them a score or a grade, and parents and managers often want you to give grades or scores. But actually, the research shows us that this is perhaps not the best approach. So in this is a little bit of research, I can send you the link later, where they gave people tasks to do, and they gave them different types of feedback. Either they gave them a grade, or they gave them no grade, but just comments, or they gave them both a grade and comments. And then a couple of weeks later, they gave them the same task to do again. And what they found is if they just gave a grade without comments, the second time they did the task, there was no real gain or improvement in their ability to do the task. And the students who had got a good grade the first time were interested and motivated to do it again. And the students who got a low grade the first time had a low interest in doing the task again. Click once. If they just gave them the comments and no grade, the second time they did it, there was on average a 30% improvement in their performance in the activity. And both the students who did well and the students who didn't do well, they were all motivated to try and do their best on the second time. But the interesting thing is if you give them both the grades and the comments, it's very much the same as if you just give them the grade. In other words, the students focus on the grades and forget about the comments. They don't really take in the comments if you give them a grade. So the message from this is, if you can avoid it, try not to give grades and scores as feedback on an activity. Sometimes, of course, you're obliged to, you have to, but if you can avoid it, much better. Yeah, Rihanna, she agrees with me. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so yeah, here I wanted to talk about a particular app which you can get from Cambridge English, Cambridge Assessment, which is a really nice demonstration of how feedback can help learning. So in this case, what you do is you type in your text as a learner, you type it in, and then the machine, the system, evaluates it and gives you feedback. But the feedback it gives is just to say, these are places you can improve it. And if you look at this example here, a student has written something, and some places it's got yellow highlight to say, maybe you can improve the phrasing here. Sometimes it's got quite specific highlighting a box around a word, which really tells you there's some problem you need to solve. So the student can then rewrite the text, trying to improve it as the feedback indicates, and then they can improve their score, improve their grade on it, and then they can keep doing this until they feel happy with it. So it's a really nice way of getting the feedback to help you work on and improve your learning, your writing skills. One more click. So I thought it was going to give the address. I say app, it's not really an app. It's a piece of software. And if you look for writeandimprove.com, you'll get it. Okay. Now the next point is that, as I said before, assessment shouldn't undermine their motivation to learn. And one of the things that's important is to try and think of developing a growth mindset. I feel I've missed a slide here. Glyn, could you do a back click?
I don't think so, unless it was a copy and paste error on my part when putting it together.
No problem. So growth mindset is, you may have heard of it, it's Carol Dweck, a professor in the US, who described how a lot of learners can fall into two categories at the extreme: a fixed mindset where they believe that this is how good they are and that it can't change. And then the other students are ones who have a growth mindset, who believe that they can improve. And the question is, what can teachers do to make their students have that growth mindset rather than fixed mindset? And a number of things which have been identified as helping students is, first of all, to praise what the students are doing in terms of their learning, not to kind of comment on their cleverness or their intelligence, which encourages a fixed mindset, but to focus on what they've learned. And when they're not able to do something, just to add the word yet in there. So use yet. You're not able to do this yet, which just encourages them to think they will get there. Encourage collaborative learning, because when they learn together in groups, they tend to have a more positive view of their own learning. And then providing guided and scaffolded practice, so building things up in steps and not just throwing them in the deep end. And the last one is quite a nice thing, where you create a folder, a bit like a portfolio, but just having it focused on the things that they've managed to do, a success folder, which they can review and make them feel, yes, I am learning, I'm making progress. I think it's very true for things like speaking, and adding recordings of them speaking at the beginning of a program and then at the end helps them to see how they're improving in a way which is very difficult in any other way. Okay, next one, Glyn. How are we doing? I think we're doing okay for time. So the last one I wanted to talk about was improving the students' ability to develop their own skills of assessing. Just give me a second. I forget something in here. Okay, sorry. So what we want to do here is we want students not just to do what the teacher says, but to think themselves about how they are learning themselves. So we want them to reflect on their own learning. We want them to evaluate what's working or not working. And then we want them to find their own ways of extending their learning. So what can we do to help them develop that learner autonomy? Glyn, next one. Okay, so there are 4 things. First of all, we can make sure that they are only focusing on 1 or 2 things. So when we're asking them to self-assess, we don't want them to self-assess on lots of things. I think if you give a click, there's an example here. So if you're doing speaking in so you're doing a show and tell activity, they're speaking there, and I think one more click. Yeah, so you might ask them to think about, am I loud and clear enough? Or am I hesitating too much or not too much? So just choose 1, possibly 2 things for them to assess themselves on. Next thing. balance encouragement and correction, that applies very much for self-assessment as well as teacher assessment. So yeah, so if you ask them to put a comment about themselves or about one of their other students, make sure they always put a positive comment and one comment about correcting or improving something. I think another thing that's useful is to give your students the phrases in English to give feedback to other students. So it was good when you should try to, or you shouldn't say. If they've got those phrases, it's really training them to give feedback. It's not just, it's also practicing their English. Okay, and then the last one is to use criteria. So when they're self-assessing themselves, it's really good if you've got some criteria that they can use. This is an example here for if you're writing a story. Here's a number of questions that they can ask themselves. I think this is probably a higher level, B1 or B1 level. Yeah, it says at the top. Can you click again? Yep. Another thing that you can do to help them develop their own ability to correct themselves is to use correction codes. And you may have different ones. This is one example. So when on a piece of writing, you don't tell them what they've got wrong or what they should do. You just put a code, and then they can work through that and correct it themselves. Another little technique I saw someone do, which I think is really nice, is that they put a piece of paper on the wall with a big S on it. And in this case, this is for third person singular. So he walks. And people often forget the S on the end of third person singular. So they put the S on a piece of paper, the teacher does. And every time if a student makes a mistake with that third person singular, he just points to the S on the wall. And the students say, oh, yeah, I know, I forgot that. And then actually they take the S off and they just leave the piece of paper on there. And so they can just point to the piece of paper. And in fact, even if there's no piece of paper, they can just point to that place in the wall. And the students immediately realize, oh yeah, I forgot the S. And then they can do that for other things. I think if you put another click, so it might be for pronunciation. Maybe they haven't pronounced the th clearly. So again, the teacher just put that on the wall and just point to that, and the students will start to correct themselves rather than the teacher having to correct them. And I think those are all the things. So that there are a whole lot of ideas there. That the point of saying all this, sharing this with you, is for you to think about how can you improve the assessment and the use of assessment in the classroom with your students to help their learning. So I'm going to hand back now to Glyn.
Yep. Okay, so I've got a few more things to take you through. So thanks, Ben. That was interesting. It was sunny Cambridge when you started, but it got really dark in the middle of your presentation. At least here it did. Okay, so one of the things that we think about a lot is as a teacher. I mean, I remember a long time ago now, but as a teacher, you have all this information coming at you, and you're trying to sort of keep on top of where all of your learners are. How do you keep on top of all of this information? How do you manage all of this data that's coming in, especially as often that information can just vanish in a puff of smoke? It's very temporary. I think one of the things to reassure you is that that's okay. Actually, a lot of this assessment, a lot of in-course assessment is about enabling you to do the thing that you want to do next, or enabling your learners to do the thing that they want to do next. You don't need to, not everything needs to be sort of squirreled away as a piece of information. So it's okay to say, well, yeah, I learned this thing, I made use of the thing that I learned, and now we move on. But we do try and think, okay, how can we help? How can we help with classroom assessment, and how can we talk about different ways of keeping track? And what are the different ways you can talk about progress? And we talk about these things. We talk about competency. achievement, completion, and engagement. And they're all ways that you can tell learners, or you can find out about learners and where they are. Competency is the thing that you are familiar with from exams, and it's great because it gives as it were, a validated picture of where your learners are. It gives you that sort of stamp, as it were, of where your learners are, and it helps to have this external picture. And it's also really helpful, as I'm sure you've been talking about today, because it has an impact back on the learning. It gives people a focus of what they're trying to achieve. However, during learning, actually in course assessment and classroom assessment, it's not always that useful. Actually using competency tests to get an idea of somebody's level doesn't help that much, because competency tests are great at saying, yes, you're at this level and this is your score, but they're not so great at saying, okay, what do you need to do to get better? What are the things that actually for you as a learner aren't so good, and for you, where do you need to concentrate? And that's just because that's not what they're designed to do. So one of the things to beware of a little bit with competency tests is they're good spaced out, but they're not great to use all of the time. They have a particular purpose that they're very good at. So we can also measure achievement. There's a couple of different ways that achievement is measured. On the left, the example you see there is from Duolingo. And on the right from Khan Academy, is basically to say, well, these are the things that we think you're going to be learning. These are the things that are part of the syllabus, and this is how well we think you've done, how well you've learned what is in the course. And it takes average scores, and it shows progress. And as machine learning comes into play, that gets better and better. But it's a very complicated picture, and it's something to be sometimes a little bit a little bit cautious about, because we all know that learners forget, and what's true one day, and just because you got that score there doesn't mean that that's what your ability really is. But it's a really helpful thing. And the one on the right from Khan Academy is kind of an interesting sort of visual breakdown of coverage of the syllabus. And I think these things are getting better and better as time progresses. The other obvious thing that learning management systems will do, and that you, I'm sure, do as a teacher, is just keep a note of what people have done. How long have they spent learning? How many activities have they done? And what score did they get? Again, really useful information, but best not to read more into it than is there. Yes, it's really helpful, and it's encouraging to see that they are getting through the work. But it's not a competency test, as it were. It's not telling you exactly where learners are. And then, of course, there's measures of engagement, and that can be really helpful. And we talk about gamification, of course, and this is often the most cited example of gamification. The idea of measuring engagement and keeping the streak going, and showing and getting XP for numbers of hours spent, and so finding out that whether people are putting the effort in, and encouraging them to put the effort in. So there are different ways to keep track, and they all have different purposes. Different, but somehow combining them all is a helpful way to think about it, and just to think, okay, well, actually, different assessments tell me different things. And of course, these are all things that come up from exam boards or from technology or apps, but often the most tried and trusted method of keeping track is the good old teacher record. And there's a couple of examples here that I picked up in blogs over the last year or so. And it's easy to, and these things are actually really powerful, because if you as a teacher make a record, you can look at it and it triggers all your bits of memory about why you made that record, and you know what it means. So it's authentic and it's dynamic because it's changing, and you write down what you think is important and it's meaningful to you. It's also low stakes. You know, this doesn't go up. This isn't kept forever on a system somewhere, but it's a really useful tool. So one thing that I think I'm not sure a lot of these other things that I was showing you are ever going to replace the great tool of teachers just keeping track. I don't know whether that's good news for you or not, whether you like these things or not, but I think they're here to stay. Very quickly, because I know we're running short of time, and I think it's getting close to lunchtime for you. Another thing, Camilla loves informal records. Great. So another thing is, why else do we assess? We talk a lot about assessment, and there is a cultural thing, particularly in Britain, about and there's always sort of waves in education where people think, we should spend less time on assessment and more time on learning. And assessment basically gets in the way of learning and just puts pressure on learners. And there's some truth in that if it's used inappropriately. But as we've already seen, assessment is a really, really good tool to help with teaching, to help get information that helps with teaching and learning. But on top of that, just the process of assessment is really helpful for learners. For those of you who may be a bit younger than me, that thing on the right is called a floppy disk. If you've never seen one before, I'm sure you can Google it. It is used for storage and retrieval. And there's a really interesting book on the science of successful learning. It's there at the bottom, Make It Stick. I don't know if you've read it. And it talks about the things that help with learning, and it talks about the role of assessment. And it talks about introducing desirable difficulty, making things hard for learners in ways that will sort of force learning to take place. And it talks about effortful retrieval, basically not just looking at something again, but trying to remember it and making it difficult. And one of the ways you make retrieval more difficult is interleaving. So learning different things one after the other, and then coming back to the thing you were doing before, rather than just focusing on one thing until you've got it right. And of course, spaced repetition, which interrupts forgetting. Which helps to cement things in long-term memory and interrupt forgetting. And the thing about all of these things, and what the research really shows, one of the things, and it's that last bullet point, is that what feels helpful to people is not always helpful. Particularly with things like interleaving. Learners can often find it and the research is quite interesting on this. Learners can find it quite counterintuitive, and they feel like, yeah, but I just want to get this right, and this isn't helping me because you keep focusing me on lots of different things. But the evidence shows that even though it feels harder, the outcomes are better. And there's evidence in academic learning and in sport and in lots of places. But it's important when you're doing these things for it not to feel high stakes, for it to feel like it's a quiz, not a test. And for your learners, rather like the skateboarder who keeps falling off the stairs, that difficult is good. Difficult doesn't show you that you're not good enough and this is never going to work. Difficult shows you that you're learning, and that's the big mindset that's the growth mindset that Ben was talking about. It's the idea that no, difficult is what we want. It shows you're learning. So difficult is good. So don't write this in the chat because we probably don't have time for that. And anyway, this is a little bit of a little bit of retrieval practice for you. So we put some sentences up at the beginning. Do you remember how they ended? If you want to, write them down on a bit of paper in front of you or on your screen or in your phone. If you don't, just see if you can remember in your head, and I'll just give you 30 seconds to see if you can remember, and then I'll show you them. And this absolutely isn't a test. Okay, here we go. So it helps you to decide where to focus your efforts, helps your students to know what they need to work on, keeps them motivated to learn, and helps them become better learners. We'll do the same with this. These were the things that Ben put up, and I've helped you here by putting them in the same colors and in the same format. Can you finish these? Can you finish these phrases? Good assessment in the classroom is clear about, checks before, and so on. I'll give you 30 seconds just to think that through again, and then I will reveal the answers. So, good assessment in the classroom is clear about the learning point. Checks where they are before teaching. Uses a suitable task or activity. Gives targeted feedback. Tells them what to do next. Keeps them feeling positive about learning. And develops self-assessment skills. So if you got them all right, give yourselves a pat on the back. If you really struggled to remember them and really struggled to remember what all that was about, that's even better, because it probably means you've learned even more because you've had to work harder to get it back into your working memory. So however well you did, it's all good. And I think that's it. Time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben and Glenn, for this brilliant presentation. As we have some sort of delay, and while questions come through, we asked them to write questions before when they were submitting for the event. So I have one question here that you might answer. How to build rubrics to assess students, rubrics?
I'm not sure quite that rubrics is a tricky word, because it means different things in different places. So I know that to an American rubric is different. So what do you mean by rubric?
Well,
do you know?
For sure, they mean when you are probably preparing some sort of exercise or activity that you want to assess their understanding or learning. How can you write down the question or exactly want to get from them?
It's a criteria,
yeah, criteria. I think, yeah.
Ben, do you want to take that, or shall I?
Well, I was just going to say, from a teacher's point of view, I think I would say one thing is just to reflect yourself. What would you expect a good answer to look like, and that's a bit of self-reflection on that. And especially if you have experience of students giving answers in the past, which things do they tend to be weak on. So that would be one thing. If you're looking more generally, so you're giving a speaking activity. Personally, I would go to Cambridge Assessment and look at their handbooks and look at the criteria that you see there, because a lot of thought has gone into those, and that's quite a good starting point if you're completely stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just about thinking about what you have been teaching and what you want them to be learning, and to focus and to kind of remember that is your focus. So if you've been doing sort of vocabulary, if you've been focusing on fluency and successful communication, then think about how do you give learners feedback on that. So it's about being true to the focus of what you've been learning in a way.
Okay, thank you. We have some other questions here. Laetitia Leon, she asks, what do you think about removing formal assessment, formal testing altogether? That's a trick.
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
So,
you go ahead. Go.
Well, so it's an interesting question. Personally, I mean, I would say this because I work for an exam board, but I think there is a role for formal testing. It's been very much in the news, certainly in the UK, because of the pandemic, because formal tests for school leavers in compulsory education have been cancelled now for 2 years in a row. And so people say, well, if it's fine for these children, why isn't it fine for all children? And personally, I think it helps to have the assessments there because it gives a focus to the curriculum, to the syllabus, and it helps to and it helps to have that external viewpoint. I think certainly we need to think more about not putting all our eggs in one basket of formal assessment and thinking more carefully about how we make sure that we can measure all of the things that it's not so easy to measure in formal assessment. But that's something we also take very seriously and rightly when we're thinking about things like Cambridge English qualifications, to make sure that we are covering, what we refer to as the construct. So we are trying to get a true measure of language ability. It's an imperfect, as we said, formal assessment is an imperfect thing, and it won't tell you as much as classroom assessment. But what it does tell you, I think, is helpful.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was on mute. I have one more here from Rihanna, and she says that this is a good one. Teaching English in Brazil is still a challenge, and it might be in many different countries, as we see. What advice you could give teachers here, to face the biggest challenges that teachers usually face in the classroom?
Oh,
it's
wow.
a general one. It's a tricky one. It's a difficult one. I know.
That's a big question. I think it might sound obvious, but I think that one of the big things is to make students feel that this is a way to communicate with other people. Because if you feel it's just a school task which you have to memorize lots of language and pass a test, no one's motivated for that. So trying to find those opportunities to take people into real communication is great. And these days with the internet, it is easier to put people in situations where English is being used. So even if it's watching a film which is in English, that's putting them into an English speaking context. But there are also pen friends systems. I think even Cambridge English has a pen pal system.
Yeah.
And there are different things like that. So I think it's focusing on taking it out of a school subject and being a way to engage with the rest of the world is what I would focus on.
Thank you, Ben. There are two more questions here. Heidi, she asks for advice about books, materials. What is a good material for us to use while preparing our students to get a B2 first certificate? Do you think you could help her with that?
Is it which
B2 first?
Which age students are we talking about?
Oh, Heidi, is it for teenagers? Can you write here on the chat? While she answers your questions for clarification, let me just ask the other one, and then we go back for her questions, okay? Her question. Is there a difference between, this is Lillian's question, is there a difference between a written test and a written activity that won't be used in a testing moment? You mean, so a written test and an activity that won't be for testing purposes. I mean, do you think we can exchange the uses of our materials in that sense?
So I'll leave the course book one to you, Ben, because I think that's more for you, and I'll try and answer this. I think for me, everything a learner does and everything a learner produces is something that can give you as a teacher information about where they are as a learner. So from that point of view, you can talk about it in broad terms as assessment, but that isn't necessarily the same as a test. So it's really important for me, it's just about thinking about, why am I asking somebody to do this? Is it about improving their confidence? Is it about giving them practice? Is it about, or is it about sort of finding out where they are? Or maybe is it about contributing towards a grade, and being clear with the learners before you do it, this is what it's for, and then seeing that through to the end and treating it in the same way afterwards. So if it's about practice, then don't then say, well, we're going to make a note of it and it's going to be for your grade. And it's always about encouraging learners. I think that mistakes are good. It's always about encouraging learners to push themselves and stretch themselves, because it's when they get something wrong that you as teachers can help them, as it were, and you find out more about what the next thing is they can do. So, or for me, it's always about making sure that you're not putting things in the way of enabling them to do that. And it's the same in anything. So I'm learning to play the piano, and my teacher always talks about practice mode and performance mode. And practice mode being, where you're focusing on all the little details and making the mistakes, and then you bring it all together into performance mode. And so it's being clear with learners: are you in practice mode or performance mode, and what do you need to do in those different modes?
Okay, we did not have a response from Lillian.
Well, just come up now. It says young learners B2 FCE. So I think it's probably it means secondary, I guess, if it's B2 first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, teens.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really answer that in detail because it depends on different circumstances. And naturally, I'm going to recommend Cambridge University Press materials, and sometimes they have different titles in different countries. But if I was teaching, what I would be doing would be thinking of a general English course to build up the communication confidence and ability with the language. And I would think of a course like Think, which I think is really good for that. It develops actually their thinking skills as well as their language skills. And then I would look at a more exam-focused course for the last preparation semester, such as Compact, which there's one for first for schools in their B2 level exam. So some combination like that, but it depends how you organize your semesters as well.
And you can always count on us here. We can put you in contact with people from the press to give you more information about that. Thank you, Ben. If you have time for one last question, there is a good one from Laetitia here. She says, I've shifted to skills assessment only, removing grammar and vocabulary controlled tasks. Do you think it decreases accuracy?
So what was the first part of that? So removing.
I've shifted to skills assessment only, removing grammar and vocabulary controlled tasks. Do you think it decreases accuracy?
It's interesting. So I think again it comes back to what the tests are used for. So I think in when you're in the classroom and you're doing assessment, what you want to do in a progress test is answer the question, have they learned the thing that we're teaching? So then you will focus on grammar and vocabulary. In for example, a competency test, there is less of a focus on that. In Cambridge English qualifications, as you will know, there is a use of English component and a use of English score. Now that is there because we believe it helps with the sort of educational impact of the tests, and it helps to focus learners. And what we try and do is, or what we do is put that, so we don't have a task looking at present simple and present continuous or particular grammar points. What we have is looking at accuracy of language in a meaningful context, which in a way to me is testing reading skills and writing skills. So it's trying to put it into a meaningful context, and I think that works in a competency test. And as somebody who spent many years teaching Cambridge exams, I think it's really valuable for that. But again, I think that is very different from what you would do in a classroom, which is where you're focused on where tasks where you are comparing present simple to present continuous are really useful because they help with that direct learning point.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben and Glenn. We have other questions, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. I would like to thank everyone for participating and engaging so much with this presentation. It was a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. Thank you one more time. And everyone, I think that we covered most of the questions, but if there is anything that we can help you with, please email me or Alberto or Colégio Farroupilha, and we will be more than happy to help you all, okay? Thank you once again. And
thank you. Alessandra, your question, we can come back next year and spend the whole hour talking about that. But thank you all very much, and thank you.
It's true. We would like to be here for another 2-3 hours, but we have to come to an end. Thank you so much once more.
Thank you very much, and thank you for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Everyone, we are getting to the end here, and to close our event, I would like, on behalf of Colégio Farroupilha and Escola de Professores Inquietos, we would like to thank you all for participating. Sorry we did not have the time to answer all your questions. Thank you for all your comments here. Thank you for sharing, participating, and engaging with us. A huge thanks to our speakers, to all of our speakers today, Professor Ivan, Alberto Costa, Ben and Glenn, and the wonderful presentations. To also the great support given by Cambridge University Press. We are also thankful for everyone who worked to make this event happen. There was a lot of preparation before. See you around. Hopefully we'll see each other again next year, and look forward to seeing you, as I said, in the next edition of Cambridge Experience. Have a great weekend. And if you need anything, and if you can answer any other questions, please get in contact with us, okay? Bye-bye. Have a great Saturday.
Hello, I'm Andressa Generosi, Projects Manager and Creator of Escola de Professores Inquietos, one of the organizers of Cambridge Experience. Escola dos Professores Inquietos is an initiative of Colégio Farroupilha, whose mission is to be a source of connection and inspiration for education professionals, fostering their transformative power. For that, we offer courses, lectures, and events, like this one that you've participated in. Cambridge Experience 2021 was developed with great care by a restless and very committed team. I'll take this opportunity to thank this team, the speakers, the Cambridge Assessment English Authorized Center of Colégio Farroupilha, and Cambridge University Press. And the year's program doesn't stop here. We have other courses, lectures, and events happening and yet to come, including one focusing on English language qualification. Visit our website of Escola de Professores Inquietos and follow us on our social media networks. Wish you a great year ahead. See you soon.